Welcome to Impact Learning Tutorials, and this is a video about the skeletal system's key joints. So in this video we're going to understand the locations of all the major bones in the skeletal system and also be able to identify the major joints in the body and some of the movements that can occur at these joints. So below you'll be able to see a diagram of the skeletal system. So I'd highly advise that you make your own notes on where all of the key bones are, because these are the key ones that you're going to need to know for your exam. So it might be separating them into sections such as arms, legs, and naming the key bones that are in these areas, because you're going to see in the next few parts of this video these bones are going to be mentioned a lot. So feel free to pause the video here or refer back to it so that you get a clear understanding of where all of these bones are. The first joint we're going to look at is the elbow joint, and the elbow joint is an example of a hinge joint because it allows flexion and extension. So you imagine when you do a bicep curl, this is an example of flexion at the elbow, and the main bones involved are the humerus, radius and ulna. Now, the main muscles that are involved in the bending of the elbow are the biceps and the triceps. It's really important for your revision that you remember that hinge joints only allow flexion and extension. They don't allow any other movements to take place. Now, the knee joint is another joint you need to know for your exam, and this allows flexion and extension, as it's an example of a hinge, and the main bones that are involved here are the femur, tibia and fibula. And the major muscles here are quadriceps and hamstrings because they allow that flexion and extension of the leg. Now, for your revision notes, again, note that the knee joint is exactly like the elbow in that it is a hinge joint. So you've got to get into the terminology that's underlined where hinges allow that flexion and extension to take place. Now, the third main joint that you need to know is the hip joint. Now, the hip joint is a ball and socket joint. This is completely different to a hinge joint because it allows rotation, circumduction, adduction and abduction to take place. So clearly you can see there it allows a much greater range of motion. So if you're making your own revision notes, you should see that where a hinge only allowed flexion and extension, the ball and socket allows a much greater range of motion. And within the hip joint, the major bones involved are the pelvis and the femur. So if you have a look at the diagram on the right, you can see how the head of the femur connects into the pelvis, and that's an example of how the ball and socket joint works. So the shoulder joint is another example in the body of a ball and socket joint. So just like the hip, the shoulder can also perform a greater range of motion with abduction, adduction, circumduction and also rotation taking place. So the shoulders and the hip are the only ball and socket joints within the body. And at the shoulder joint, the main bones that you need to remember are the humerus and the scapula. So if you're a little bit unsure of exactly where these are, you can either look at the diagram on the right, or you can rewind this video to where you see the diagram of the skeletal system and just familiarise yourself with it a little bit. So just to recap then, that the ball and socket allows a greater range of motion in all directions. Therefore, for every movement that occurs at the shoulder, there's going to be a wide range of muscles involved. So it's worth maybe giving a couple of examples yourself in your own notes of movements that can occur here. But the key point you need to remember is that the shoulder joint is ball and socket and it allows the full range of motion. We hope you found this video useful. Please subscribe to keep up to date with our latest tutorials.